We're live now?
We're live.
All right.
Coming to you live.
Guys, it's 2020 and it is fucking difficult to disguise a voice live. BRV got the man here, got his voice disguised so you can't tell who he is. I hope it's working. I don't want him to start talking and then it go off. So anyways, this is going to be fun. Apologize everyone for having to wait. We're trying to make it to where BRV he could have video and he could use the snap camera, and we're trying to turn him into a pickle. That didn't work. We should have abandoned the idea to turn him into a pickle. See, there's Jake up there being a pickle. We should have just stuck with the voice changer. We fucked it all up, but we're here. BRV, it's good to have you, man.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me.
So if you don't know who BRV is, BRV, one of my good friends from Energy FinTwit, notorious account on Energy FinTwit. I think you're almost up to like 10,000 followers now, aren't you?
Yeah, like 8,200, I think, something like that. So
nice
counting.
So I'm getting comments in the comments section about my haircut. So appreciate you guys noticing my haircut. Just got the military haircut yesterday. So dude, we gotta, I don't even know where we start with this, man. Like Jake brought up a good point earlier. He's like, how did BRV even get on Energy FinTwit? And so, I said in my post that you're a petroleum engineer by trade. People might have listened or read the Reuters article and seen you mentioned in there, going from petroleum engineer to making $4 million on shorts. You wrote the Whiting paper. We'll talk about that some, but how did you get tangled up in this mess on Energy FinTwit?
It was pretty simple, actually. I had a buddy of mine that I actually went to petroleum engineering school with, who lives in Dallas, and he was just sending me these screen captures, actually, of Mr. Skilling posts that I thought were pretty hilarious. And one day I was like on vacation with my wife and her family, and I was bored, and he sent me one. I was like, man, this is funny. Like, I'm going to get on here and see what this is all about. And it really was that simple. So Mr. Skilling was my first follow, and, I followed the spider web after that. So here we are. And that was July of last year. So about 9 months ago.
Well, it's funny because I got on Energy FinTwit because of Mr. Skilling as well, but somehow Mr. Skilling found me and he added me, and I was like, who the fuck is this? And then I start following him, and then all of a sudden I just start seeing all these Twitter threads going off. And I think you were one of the first people that I followed. So it was around that.
It was like a year ago. Colin came back to the office and he's like, I've discovered a community of people on Twitter. And I'm like, that sounds like a cesspool. Sign me up.
I want it. Well, the funny thing is, I was like the biggest social media hater of all time. Like, I bashed just Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. Like, I just thought it was such a stupid waste of time. And then I just got sucked in, and now I just spend way too much time messing with Twitter now at this point.
I want you to know that More Drilling said that he's drilled 3 miles in less time than it took us to get this webinar going. So,
yeah, that's the only person that I want to know who they are in real life. I'm desperate to meet More Drilling.
There's a funny story here for anyone that's not on Energy FinTwit, is that forever everyone's believed that More Drilling is BRV. It's just a second account for him. And even I believe this. More Drilling sent me a message one time, and I thought it was kind of weird because I know BRV, and I was like, why is he messaging me from More Drilling? And he's like, no, man, I swear that I'm not BRV. BRV just tells everyone that to fuck with me. So that's gonna be part of our investigative series, is going down the EFT trail to figure out who actually owns whose accounts. So dude, let's go back a little bit, because I wrote a post, a couple months ago, or not a couple months ago, maybe a month ago, talking about the Whiting report that you guys put out. I think that you put it out, was it October or November?
Yeah, it was Halloween, October 31st.
Yeah. So right around that time in fall, you guys came out with this Whiting report. It was an in-depth analysis of Whiting's assets and making a case for their assets, or for their company's equity being worth $0. And it was a pretty popular post on Energy FinTwit. What went into that paper, and was that the first short case that you guys had found, or was it the first one that you had done that much analysis on?
So that was the first one I ever collaborated with those particular guys. I'd actually done one before, way back like 2012, 13, which actually ironically was what sucked me into the whole shorting energy companies. Back in those days, I was like a staff engineer, just grinding away, on the day-to-day stuff, making completion reports, and we had a sale and there was a lull and we were sitting around bored all day, and somehow we got sucked into this one company, and me and another engineer I worked with just chased this rabbit so far, and ended up with if you thought the Whiting presentation, which I think ended at 93 slides, was big, that one was like 250.
Jesus.
Something crazy. Yeah.
How long does it take you to put together a report that big?
God, I'd say like total man hours split across the groups. Or the people, you're probably talking maybe 300, 3 to 400. Yeah. It was a real endeavor, honestly. And, I learned a lot in the process because some of the other people involved were more kind of credit guys and stuff that knew more about that area, which I didn't know. So there was a learning process too. So, yeah, but it was a lot of fun, man. It was a really cool process, and
Someone wants to know in the comments. Robert Smith asks, "Who does BRV short next?" Is there? That's a good question. Is there any meat on the bone left on some of these EMPs? If you're short.
Sure, dude. There's a ton of meat. The question is it's just a timing thing, I think, because you're sitting here in a world of, what I would call technical insolvency of maybe like greater than 50% of your, mid independents, right? And so, within and to that extent, you're saying that they're highly technically insolvent in that like their debt is dramatically worth more than their assets. And so, there's a lot of companies that fit that box, but, you get into a lot of very particular questions about like when do they have liquidity issues and when are their bonds due and all that, right? And so it's probably going to play more into the equation than, you want some near-term maturities, right? Like people that are going to end up owing a lot of money here in the next year or two. So within that group, it narrows it down quite a bit. And, there's some people that are out there that, would make good candidates. But the problem with saying that, I think, is that they could jump up, 100, 200% between now and then. And so it's a lot harder to do down here than it was to do, back in March when everything was on its way down, right?
Yeah. A&D Bad Boy asked BRV, did you ever doubt your EMP shorts?
Yeah. I got margin called bigly. It was probably the first week of January. Yeah. Lost a ton of money, running through December into January. I literally, the day I got margin called, the next day is when everything started to turn. So it was seriously like a 24-hour period.
That's
yeah. Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart, man.
I think, anytime someone comes on Energy FinTwit talking about Energy FinTwit hates Shale and they're only there to short and take down Shale, first, I don't think that they understand how shorting works or why it's needed for an efficient market. And maybe you can touch on that a little bit, but I always think that they're directing messages at you, right? And, you've always been vocal about Shale and, you have the technical understanding of what's wrong with Shale and what's wrong with completions designs and things of that nature. But, let's clear the record. Do you hate American oil and gas? Because a lot of people think that you hate American oil and gas.
I mean, honestly, it's the exact opposite, and that's really what motivates me more than anything. When I came into this business, it was like Chesapeake and a handful of guys were drilling horizontal wells, but it wasn't the norm. I mean, my first job was all vertical, right? And so, I love the guys in the field, and I spent a lot of time in the field. I spent almost, I don't know, 5-7 years of my career starting out in the field. And, I think that for what it is in its essence, it's, a bunch of really smart, hardworking guys. It's probably the only place in America where you can not have a college degree. You can be willing to bust your ass. You can go out in the field, you can make a good living, and you can have a really good life working in the oil field. And I think that's what's so cool about oil and gas, right? And, but what I hate about it is, what has become, the standard MO for these guys that aren't in the business to play by the rules. We're all in this life to make money and be successful, but within that there's rules, right? And my rules personally are you're gonna tell people you're making a profit. It needs to be a real profit, right? Like, you don't lie to people and you don't try to steal their money from them so that you can put it in your own pocket by misleading what the outcome is. And uncertainty versus actual real knowledge of the inadequacies of your economics of your projects is two completely different things. And we cross that line. And so, no, I don't hate energy. I don't like what has become the energy business in the United States.
Yeah. Dale Redmond asked, how much capital did you start playing with initially? You don't have to answer specifically on how much you guys started with, but if you wanted to build a solid short thesis and execute on it, how much capital do you recommend?
Well, I mean, you can use as much money as you want. It would be a question of how smart it is to allocate, what percent of resources that you have available to different, things. And when you've got something like shorting and, they always say it's unlimited on the downside, right? Like a stock can go up 700% on you before it goes bankrupt, right? And so you got to have the cash on the sidelines that can either take that kind of blow or you better be hedged, right? And so there's a balance there, right? And you could start with $1 or you could start with $1 million, right? It's just a question of how much other assets do you have available, and you just don't want to put yourself into a place where you're going to have a liquidity issue. So,
yeah. Mark Christian asked, speaking of companies on the way down, do you see an opportunity shorting the service companies?
Yes. I mean, I think I posted about this on Twitter quite a bit, but I think you've got a lot of companies. I think the problem with shorting service companies is that they can cut their costs, expenses a lot faster and easier than an E&P, right? And they generally tend to not have the debt load, right? So, I mean, if you look at somebody like, Pump, right? Like they're going to have a lot of problems. There's, I think, 50 plus frac companies in West Texas, and you're probably going to have, 50-ish frac crews running in West Texas. So you're going to have as many companies there as there are crews running. So there's going to be highly competitive, and you're going to see not only the total gross revenue in the whole business get cut way down, but the margins that remain are going to be cut way down. And so, but you're always trying to find somebody that's going to be insolvent, right? Because as people love to talk about, the optionality of these equities, right? If you've got duration, you've got theta, then you can last a really long time, and you find that the longs are willing to pile into those names just because of the fact that they can last a long time. And that's why it's difficult to be short service companies. So,
yeah. And Robert Smith asks, do you predominantly express positions through options or equity shorts?
That's a good question. I mean, when the options were a lot cheaper, I bought a lot of options. And when the volatility went way up, they got really expensive, and I started moving more towards shorts. And the delta on like the call put difference of cost went way up. And so it was a lot cheaper to buy a call than it was to buy a put. And so when that happened, I started shorting a lot and buying calls to hedge my short. Makes sense.
Okay. Man, we're getting a lot of questions here. Sorry, I was reading them. Kind of bouncing all over the place. But someone said, Hallie Burton said, I see BRV decided to simply go with the talking through a fan idea to change his voice.
We tried to do Santa Claus as the original.
Yeah, we wanted Santa Claus's voice with BRV as a pickle on the video. We thought it was an interesting combo. Couldn't make it work. But someone asked, who do you think ConocoPhillips would acquire, or do you think they will acquire anyone? Do you think majors are gonna?
The question is, are they in a position to acquire anyone? I think that should be the first question.
Yeah.
Is ConocoPhillips? Yeah, I mean, in the scheme of things, they're probably higher likelihood of acquiring somebody, I would think. Yeah, I mean, it seems like if you look at their IR presentations, that they are pretty committed to West Texas and unconventionals. And really, like I will say, in a rare compliment, their development of their unconventional resources has probably been the most disciplined and smartest of any of the unconventional producers in the United States. And they spaced things appropriately. They clearly took their time, and they didn't go crazy. And so I respect that part of it, their development plan. When, yeah, I mean, I'm sure they're going to buy somebody. Is it going to be a significant acquisition? I mean, I don't know. I would say your Chevrons and Exxons are probably an almost certainty that they're going to make a big West Texas acquisition in the next year, would be my guess.
Mr. Fungi wants to know, why are you anonymous? That's in the hard questions here.
I mean, I'd say that I'm like anonymous in like a very broad group of people. I mean, if I had to guess how many people I've told them who I am on EFT, it's probably like getting close to 20, 30, 40. I don't know. I mean, and then I'm sure it's gotten out more than that. There might be 100 people that know who I am. And, I'm not really honestly that concerned about it. I used to be, but these days I'm not. And I don't I don't feel the need to broadcast it, but I also probably expect that at some point in the next year, I'll probably just switch my anonymous account over and just become me at some point.
Can we unveil you on our show?
No,
bring out the black.
I mean, I'll do it in a premeditated way, but it's, I'm not concerned about it. How about that?
That's sufficient. That works. Someone asks, why have so many smart people whiffed so hard on the mid-con? What was different about their approach you took?
Oh yeah, mid-con, man. That was my bread and butter for almost a decade on the shorts. The mid-con is probably, just generally speaking, it's gassier. There's some marketing issues. For some reason, like the pipe capacity that has historically been there hasn't been sufficient. The markets like OGT and some of those are just historically bad markets, Pepple. And then geologically, without going into a rabbit hole here, the stack specifically, let's say, it really gets in, and this is where like the technical part of it, it's really complicated. And, but I would describe it down to one detail, which is the bubble point pressure of the oil in the stack is really, really, really high. And so you drill well and you bring the reservoir above bubble point and your recovery factors go way down. And so you're talking almost double, say, the Bakken, right? So the downspaceability of the Bakken was really high because the bubble point was really low, and the downspaceability of the stack was really, really low because the bubble point was so high. And that, I think, people miss that detail a lot, and that's what killed the stack more than anything.
The Shale Unikitty asked, BRV, what are your thoughts on publicly traded mineral companies? You know, they have revenue, no debt, fairly low G&A. Do you deal with publicly traded mineral companies at all?
No, I've never gone there. I mean, I can say that I know some smart people that hate them. And, you know, the general thesis there is that, you know, they've way dramatically overpaid for the cash flow that you're going to get. So by buying into that, you know, $200,000 a net mineral acre in West Texas, you know, you're just never going to get a decent return out of it, right? But have I personally done any work? No. I mean, because it's not interesting to me as a long, and it's not interesting to me as a short because of the lack of leverage. So I avoid it. Don't spend my time on it if I don't think I can get an investment out of it, you know?
I feel like A&D Bad Boy's in the chat trying to be an instigator. He says, what does BRV think about tankers?
Oh gosh. I mean, I do own some tanker stocks, which I know is very controversial for a long time. But, you know, ironically, like, I think being long tankers is easier to be than being short energy, but it's kind of the same hypothesis because you're betting that things are going to stay in contango and that people are going to want to store oil and they're willing to pay a lot of money to do that. And so, yeah, so he's a big tanker guy, and there's been a lot of disputes on EFT about that. But
I know.
But I
woke up one day, or I don't think I woke up, but I just got on my Twitter app and I had like 100 notifications. Somehow I got drug into a debate about tankers. I don't know shit about tankers. I was like, what is this? Mark Moon asked, he said at some point there has to be a bottom. So when that time comes, who, if anybody, do you view as worthy of taking a long position in?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you want to have some margin of safety and you want to be a long-term holder and you don't want to make obscene returns, you don't want to be greedy, I would buy Chevron. And then if you want to, you know, be a little bit more risk on, then probably some of the Canadian names start to make sense. You know, the Canadian Natural Resources and the Suncors and those guys that have a lot of torque on them if oil price does go up, right? I can't personally bring myself to invest in the unconventional space in the United States, and there's really nobody in the mid-independent that's not highly leveraged to that space at this point. You know, now that obviously California Resources and Denbury were probably your exceptions, and they had their own separate issues and are probably on their ways to bankruptcy too. But so yeah,
I got a good question. I got a good question for you. I know this one's gonna be a barn burner because I've seen you say that private equity is destroying the fabric of our nation. So why do you not like private equity? Don't they serve a purpose?
Well, I think, you know, I've gotten in trouble for those comments because, you know, like Mr. Hefner points out, you know, like,
Shut up.
And, you know, yeah, there may be some conflicts there in my take, but, you know, I think that like energy private equity to me is completely different. Like, I think it's a misnomer in the sense that like they take highly risky bets on flipping acreage, and there's really not like the standard across the board description of private equity can't really be applied to what they do. So, you know, private equity that I criticize is, you know, maybe more on like, say, like a manufacturing and those types of, you know, places where you get these guys that come in and they buy a business and they lever it up and they get rid of all the expensive people with all the experience, right? And they cut all them out and they jack the prices up and they hope that there's a certain amount of inelasticity to the demand of their product, and they just scalp the company and, you know, try to get all their cash out of it as soon as they can and hopefully make a good return on their equity. Then they create this giant debt structure, and this gets into the whole bankruptcy code of the United States and the flaws there, right? Because as people love to point out, right, we've decided to privatize gains and socialize losses through, you know, bailouts and things like that, right? So
Yeah.
If you can make the cash and you pull it out really fast and you make a good multiple and a good return, then you just walk away and you took, maybe somebody's business that they loved and built their whole life, and, you lit it on fire, fired everybody, put some cash in your pocket and walked away from it. And that's what I don't like about private equity.
Yeah. We had an interesting question about before that question, Jake, the one about biofuels or renewables. I said, what do you think about biofuels or renewables? I know it's not popular with the oil and gas group, but still in the energy market.
Yeah, I honestly have absolutely no perspective on any of that.
No fucking do BRV just short.
I just
shell code, man.
I don't know. I probably wouldn't touch them. I'm sure it's a huge scam. I'm sure.
It has to be, man. It has to be.
It's gotta be.
Okay.
All right, so let's go back to something What's your Shale Unikitty ass BRV? What's your gut reaction here in the news? Like MRO layoff with exec comp increase.
Oh yeah, I mean that's just such a bad look for our business, and I don't think it represents the people that work in our business. And I hate what that's I haven't really carried that burden as like Mr. Skilling has, that loves to make those posts, but it's definitely one of the truly sad things that you see. It's just unadulterated greed, and it's really, I hate it. And I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's right. I mean, if you're going to cut people and lay off, then you gotta, eat what you cook too. And they don't.
Yeah.
So.
We've had some close friends that we've had offline conversations with that have absolutely led by example. They had to lay off a significant amount of people, but they themselves are paying themselves practically nothing compared to what they were before. And I think more and more, executives do need to do that. But like you said, that's not necessarily your burden to bear as much as it is Mr. Skilling. We'll let him keep roasting everybody.
You're right.
Halliburton asked, who's your favorite OFS and what's your favorite OFS stock? I feel like she's tricking you with this one, man.
Yeah, that's bait for sure.
It's gotta be Halliburton, right?
I'll throw a bone to my boy Teddy Gambino here, and Trican probably has a decent balance sheet. You see a lot of insider commitment on that stock, and probably a little bit safer in terms of like activity and a correlation to a rebound in energy prices in Canada than you would find anywhere in the United States. I just don't think that you're going to see rig count in the United States, or really probably offshore for that matter, rebound anytime soon. So
yeah. What's Mark wants to know, what's your thoughts on the industry outlook 3 to 5 years out? What do you anticipate happening?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that's like a really important, interesting question, because I'm very bearish oil price in the near term, because there's a lot of overhang and there's a lot of people talk about pent up demand, but I think it's the opposite. Somebody made a joke that I thought was very intelligent, but it's like they talk about the V-shaped recovery, and they're like, it's more like a backwards square root recovery, right? Like it's going to drop, it's going to come back up, but it's not going to go back to where it was. And I think that's right. And so, but that's like, say, near term, medium term timelines, long term, right? So I think 2019, you saw the smallest amount of investment in international and big projects since I think it was 1984. Okay. So like all the capital and everything got dumped into unconventionals, and unconventionals, decline really, really fast, right? So within that, timeline, you start stretching out into 5 years, you're going to see that the unconventionals and the capital starvation on that group of assets is going to create a very dramatic drop in the amount of worldwide supply coming from the United States. And then I think you're going to see the lack of investment internationally and offshore start to come into the picture. And I'm incredibly bullish oil in that, that up to 5 year timeline, but the next 2 years, I think we're in trouble, dude. So.
Yeah. Rob Smith, Brian asked, how long do you think it takes to work through our oversupply? But I think you pretty much answered it with that previous answer. So bearish, over the next 2 years, but over a 5-year time frame, things will return back to normal. Rob Smith says, what do you think about the Fed and Treasury stepping in to backstop oil and gas loans?
Oh, I mean, I hate it, honestly. As somebody that owns their own production and probably would benefit personally a lot from that kind of treatment, like, I think that it's just totally un-American. And, you can't pick winners and losers in industries, and you can't, it's just not fair. Like, and I think even politically, it's really stupid because, Trump is going to win Texas. He's going to win Oklahoma, no matter what. The Republicans are always going to win those states. And, if you are Trump, you're trying to win Wisconsin, Michigan, right? Like those places. And I think it's going to backfire on him if he chooses, I'm going to bail out oil, but I'm not going to bail out, the guys making parts for the auto industry or whatever. So,
I laugh about it because I don't know if there's a more conservative industry than American oil and gas, and an entire industry that's so against socialism. And, everyone's against socialism until it benefits them, right? Until they put out money to save their business. So it's this really weird paradigm to see that oil and gas is even considering taking any backstop from the feds. Shaleco Energy. Okay, shout out to Shaleco Energy. This dude inspired me to take my meme game up a level. Like, he brought out something out of me that I didn't even know. I was like, fuck, I got to start putting out video memes on Twitter. I was really inspired by Shaleco Energy. Like, I wasn't even thinking to do that.
Y'all don't realize how many times I text or call Colin, and he's like, hey, don't text me. I'm in the zone making a dang meme.
My wife's version of me making a meme. Guys, we'll try to work on the technology stack and get it working next time. Anyways, appreciate you guys. Catch you next time.
Thanks, guys.